Okay, before we move on to our next selection structure, which is the two-armed if statement, we're going to do one more example. And in this case, what we're going to do is use a one-arm if statement again, but we're going to put a compound Boolean expression inside it. So a compound expression is one that uses our logical and or the logical or, and we'll use that to create an application that works sort of like this. I've got my app here. Basically just displays a square on the screen, and if I put my mouse pointer somewhere inside the square, it's filled red. If I'm outside, it's not filled, inside filled. Okay? So that is the application we're going to use, and we'll use an if statement to determine when the mouse pointer is in that region. Okay? So let's start with some design work. For this example, we're going to have something like this. We'll have our whole display window, which is in blue, and let's just say it's 500 by 500 pixels. And then in the center, we have our box, or square, and let's say that it's 200 by 200. Okay? So what we have to think about is if the mouse pointer is inside the box, it has to be somewhere to the right of that line. It has to be somewhere to the left of this line. It has to be below this line. And it has to be above that line. So if all four of those things are true, then we're somewhere inside this area, and therefore we would draw that square with a red center. If any one of those things is not true, so let's say I'm to the left of this line, that would mean I'm over here, then this wouldn't be filled. If I'm above this line, up here someplace, then it wouldn't be filled. Okay? So if all four of those things are true, then I'm going to fill the square. All right? Well, where would those lines be? Let's talk about that. Our center point of our screen and also our box is right here, and that would be at the width divided by 2, height divided by 2 point, correct? So it's halfway over and halfway down. So if this is the center, then this line here, this up and down line, would be 100 pixels away from the center because the whole square is 200. Okay, so this line here would have an x value that's equal to the center minus 100. Okay? Similarly, this line here would have an x value of the center plus 100. Okay? Well, what about our other two lines, the up and down lines? There we'd care about our y coordinates. So this one would be a y coordinate of the height divided by 2 minus 100. And this one down here would have a y coordinate of the height divided by 2 plus 100. Okay? So we can use those four pieces of information to tell whether or not I'm in the center of the square or the center of the screen and whether the square should be colored red or not. So let's put that into some flowcharts and see how this goes. For this example, we're going to need two methods. We're going to need our setup method and our draw method. The things that we do in setup are pretty banal, not very exciting, but we'll put them down anyway just so we understand. We're going to size our window. And then let's set the stroke color that we're going to use for our line. So let's set that to black. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make the line thick. So when you saw the example there previously, the line that was drawn was thicker than normal. And so we're going to do that by setting the stroke weight to 5 pixels. Okay? And that's just the thickness of that line. And that'll be the end of our setup method. Now draw is a little more complicated. Okay? What we're going to do is we're going to have a variable again. And we'll call it F color. Okay? And that's going to represent the background of the window and also the color that's in the center of the rectangle. So the first time it's drawn, it'll be gray, it'll match the background. So once I set that color, I'll go ahead and make a background call. So the background of the window is gray. And now I have to make my decision. Okay? And this is where we're going to use that compound decision. Okay? Compound Boolean statement. So I'm going to abbreviate mouse X and mouse Y. Mouse X has got to be to the right of that left-hand vertical line that we had. So that would be mouse X is greater than or equal to the width divided by 2 minus 100. And at the same time, mouse X has got to be less than or equal to the right vertical line, which we said was width divided by 2 plus 100. And then we have our mouse Y pieces. So the mouse Y has got to be greater than or equal to height divided by 2 minus 100. And finally then, the mouse Y has got to be less than or equal to height divided by 2 plus 100. Okay? So that's a compound Boolean expression. 4 things ANDed together with logical AND. So for this to be true, all 4 of those things have to be true. If any one of them isn't true, then the whole expression is false. Okay? So that's my condition that goes in my diamond. If that's true, what we're going to do is we're going to set the F color to be red. If it's false, we just skip that statement. Then we'll set our fill to F color. Okay? So we'll either be filling the rectangle with gray or red, depending on the result of that condition. And then lastly, we'll go ahead and draw our rectangle. Okay? And our rectangle coordinates will be the width divided by 2, height divided by 2, oops, almost, minus 100, minus 100, and then 200, 200. Okay? We have to do that minus 100 part because we're specifying that point on the rectangle. All right? So there's an algorithm for implementing this particular problem or solution to this problem. Let's go ahead and take a look at the code. Okay, we're going to go ahead and implement the program that we just designed to do the red box. And we had 2 methods that we needed there. We needed our setup method and we needed our draw method. Let's get that out of the way. All right, and in the setup method it was pretty simple. We had 3 things we needed to do. We set the size of the window, and then the other 2 pieces were to set the color of the outline of the rectangle. And if you're going to use a grayscale color from white to black, when you specify colors, you can just use one number. So 0 would be black, 255 would be white. So I'm going to set a black color for my line there. And then I'm going to change the thickness of the line with the stroke weight method call. And I'll make that 5 pixels in width. Okay? And those were the things we wanted to do in setup. In draw, we started out with creating a local variable called fColor. And that's going to be the color we use to fill the background of the screen and also the center optionally of the square. So for right now, we'll make it gray. So let's do, I don't know, 200, 200, 200. Should be a grayscale number. Or, alternatively, just 200 by itself should also be a gray color. Okay? Then we'll set the background to be that color. And now we can make our decisions. Okay? And the decisions were about whether or not we were inside that box. So we had a compound if statement, and that's going to look like this. One of if our mouse x is greater than or equal to the width divided by 2 minus 100, and mouse x is less than or equal to the width divided by 2 plus 100. That gives me my left and right orientation. And now we have up and down. Mouse y has to be greater than or equal to height divided by 2 minus 100, and less than or equal to height divided by 2 plus 100. Okay, so there's the compound Boolean expression we're using for this if. This whole thing is one Boolean expression that evaluates to true or false. Okay? So if that's true, that means we're inside the box. And what we want to do in that case, sometimes processing fights you unnecessarily for indentation. Most of the time it's right. A lot of times it isn't. But if that's true, then what we're going to do is we're going to change the color so that we can fill the rectangle or the square with red. So I'll set my color value by a color method call again to be red. Okay? Then after that, whatever the value of the fill color is, F color, we're going to set that as the fill for our rectangle that we're going to draw. And then finally, we'll draw the rectangle itself with a rect method. Okay, so we do that by specifying the upper left corner, which would be width divided by 2 minus 100, height divided by 2 minus 100, and then the dimensions of the rectangle itself, or the square itself, are 200 by 200. And there we go. So let's test this program out. And here's our application. You can see that as long as my mouse pointer is outside the square, nothing happens. But once I get inside the square, it turns red. If I go outside, it goes back to gray. Okay? So that's how that application is coded. So we're actually able to do quite a complicated decision here by using a compound Boolean expression. Coming up next, we're going to look at another version of the if statement, which is called the two-armed if, and that gives us another option, that is a place to put statements to evaluate if the expression here is false instead of true.